Oh, hi there. I'm going to steal a few minutes of your time, but don't worry, I'll try to make it worth it. Just put your feet up and prepare to gain a few points on your IQ. Pride was born June 28, 1970. The first Pride Parade was then known as the Christopher Street Liberation March, named after the street where Stonewall is located. For those who don't know what Stonewall means for the community, the Stonewall riots were a series of violent demonstrations by members of the community from June 28th to the 1st of July 1969 in New York. Marsha P. Johnson, a self-identified drag queen and also an American gay liberation activist, started what marked a huge turning point for LGBT rights. The Pride Parade began on Washington Place and moved up 6th Avenue, ending with a gay inn in Central Park. Before Pride, there was the Annual Reminder in Philadelphia. It was a somber affair with dress codes and a promise to be unthreatening. It was started by the Mattachine Society, a gay men's rights group formed in 1950. Craig Rodwell was the Mattachine member who had come up with the idea. The first annual reminder was held in 1965, but after the Stonewall riots, Rodwell and his partner Sargent thought about moving the reminder to New York, but it was clear that they needed an entirely new event. They needed something bigger and bolder. 5 months after Stonewall, activists Ellen Brody and Linda Rhodes attended the Eastern Regional Conference of Homophile Organizations with Rodwell and Sargent. It was decided that an annual march would be held on the last Sunday of June in New York. LA, San Francisco and Chicago planned concurrent marches. These marches had no formal dress code and people were reminded to express themselves. It was not easy to plan and over a dozen LGBTQ+ rights groups were involved, including the Lesbian Feminist Group, the Lavender Menace, Gay Liberation Front, Lesbian Civil Rights Organization, Daughters of Bilitis, Trans Rights Organization, Queens Liberation Front, and various student groups. Brenda Howard, the founder of the New York Area Bisexual Network, or the Mother of Pride, coordinated the week-long celebrations leading up to the Gay Pride Parade. The word pride that everyone now associates with the community was suggested by L. Craig Shoemaker over the phrase gay power. The first parade was a success with a turnout of around 5,000 people, and every year more and more cities have joined the celebrations. It was LA that introduced the festival element, and in 1978, the Pride flag, designed by Gilbert Baker, flew for the first time at the San Francisco Pride. Pride has turned into a monumental event for people of the LGBTQ+ community, where everyone is welcome and accepted, and the scale of it is exponentially growing and giving people hope. All throughout history there have been a range of diverse LGBTQ+ icons, as far back as the 14th century, where there was John Rykener, also known as Eleanor, a male transvestite prostitute, and in 1836 there was Mary Jones, a black trans sex worker who lived in New York, who stood up against the slavery-supporting court system and was labelled as the man monster. There are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of untold stories about queer people standing up for their rights and living their authentic lives that have been forgotten or erased throughout history. But here are some that we do know. Not everyone knows this, but Wonder Woman was also a queer icon. In an interview with the writer, he acknowledged that she is also interested in people of the same gender. This could mean that she is either bisexual or pansexual, like most Amazonians. Wonder Woman was created to help Dr. William Marston's wife Elizabeth and their polyamorous partner Olive. The first explicit lesbian relationship appeared in the Wonder Woman comics in 1988. This relationship was between Menelope and Penelope. However, this relationship didn't last long due to Menelope's death. There were a few other minor lesbian relationships between the Amazonians, as well as Queen Hippolyta. Another popular queer superhero was Deadpool, but he is a lot less subtle about his sexuality in the movies than Wonder Woman. Anne Lister is famously known for her diaries that she kept. In these diaries, she mentioned her daily life and included her lesbian relationships. She had written up 4 million words, and about a sixth of them included intimate details of her romantic and sexual relationships with other women. However, these were written in a code that was deciphered in the 1930s. Anne is called the first modern lesbian for her clear self-knowledge and openly lesbian lifestyle. In her diaries, which she started at age 15, she detailed and described her lesbian identity and affairs, as well as her methods that she used for seduction and her first love, Eliza Rain. Michael Dillon, born 1915 England, was the first trans man to undergo phalloplasty, which in short is the construction of a penis using skin grafts. In 1939, he approached Dr. George Voss, who had been experimenting with the male hormone testosterone to treat excessive menstrual bleeding. He then caught the attention of one of the world's few plastic surgery practitioners at the time, who performed a double mastectomy, which is more commonly known as top surgery. However, it was another plastic surgeon, Harold Gillies, who performed at least 13 surgeries between 1946 and 1949, hiding the fact that he was performing sexual assignment surgery by diagnosing Dylan with acute hypospadias. Dylan later went on to qualify as a physician in 1951. Lily Elby was a transgender woman who went through a female sex change in 1930. In 2 years, she went through 4 surgeries. The first was the removal of the testicles, which was performed by Dr. Ludwig Levy-Lenz. The rest of the surgeries were performed by Dr. Kurt Warner-Cross, the first being an ovary implant onto her abdominal musculature. The third was to remove the penis and scrotum, and finally the fourth was a uterus implant and a construction of a vaginal canal. Before her 4th surgery, Lily was finally able to have her sex and name legally changed. Contrary to popular belief, Lily was the second transgender woman to undergo vaginoplasty and not the first. Roberta Cowell was the first transgender woman to undergo the surgery and was also a World War II Spitfire pilot. However, in September 1931, 3 months after her final surgery, Lily passed away from infection. A journalist by the name Louise Lasson helped Lily write a book about her story called Man into Woman, which was published in 1933. In 2015, The Danish Girl was released. It is a movie adaptation of the novel written by David Ebershoff, where Lily Elby is portrayed by Eddie Redmayne. He said that while making the movie, it was a hugely educational experience for him to learn about trans issues and what the trans community have been through. His casting for the film had been criticised by some trans activists who argue that despite his talent, trans roles should be given to trans actors as they have a deeper understanding of the community and can show this. The director stepped forward to say, "Eddie was really the only person I wanted to make the film with, and I was very passionate about that. I was a great believer in him as an actor. I also think there's a certain gender fluidity that I sensed in him that I found intriguing, and it led me to think that he might be a really interesting person to cast in this role." Some other films with transgender main characters are Boys Don't Cry, About Ray, and A Girl, none of which cast an actual trans person as the main character. George Michael was a prominent gay rights campaigner. He came out as gay following his arrest in April 1998 for engaging in a lewd act in front of an undercover police officer in Beverly Hills. In 1993, Michael lost his partner Anselmo Filippo to an AIDS-related illness. Michael said, "I had my very first relationship at 27 because I really had not actually come to terms with my sexuality until I was 24. I lost my partner to HIV, then it took about 3 years to grieve." He was a passionate supporter of the HIV charity, the Terence Higgins Trust, and fronted a documentary about HIV the year he came out. A lot of queer icons fell victim to HIV/AIDS, such as Freddie Mercury, who died at 45 in 1991. He was diagnosed in 1987, but didn't tell anyone until the day before his death. His story was shared in Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie released in 2018, where he was portrayed by Rami Malek. Elton John said that during the 1980s, he took the risk of having unprotected sex, and he considered himself lucky that he avoided getting HIV. Elton became a close associate with AIDS charities and raised large amounts of money and used his public influence to help bring awareness to AIDS. He even founded the Elton John AIDS Foundation in 1992 as a charity to fund programs for HIV/AIDS. The movies Philadelphia and Holding the Man both accurately depict how AIDS affected people's lives and were both based on true stories. Princess Diana, nicknamed the People's Princess, was passionate about ridding the stigma surrounding HIV/AIDS. All it took was a simple handshake to challenge people to educate themselves on the matter. In April 1991, she told people that HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. In April 1987, Princess Diana was responsible for opening Britain's first ever AIDS ward at London Middlesex Hospital. The laws surrounding the LGBTQ+ community in the UK have slowly evolved over the years, starting in 1102 when the Council of London encouraged the English public to believe that homosexuality was a sin. Later, in 1533, King Henry VIII passed the Bugger Act, making all male-on-male sexual activity punishable by death. This law only ran to the end of Parliament and later changed in 1861 to homosexuality was punishable by 1 year of imprisonment. In 1885, the Criminal Law Amendment Act took this a step further, making all homosexual acts illegal even if it was done in private. The legislation was so unclearly worded that it became known as the Blackmailers Charter. This is when, in 1895, Oscar Wilde fell victim to it, convicted of gross indecency. Wilde's word provided hope in the face of injustice. To regret one's own experiences is to arrest one's own development. To deny one's own experiences is to put a lie into the lips of one's own life. It is no less than a denial of the soul. In the film The Happy Prince, Rupert Everett portrays Wilde, who is living out his last days in exile. Female homosexuality was never explicitly targeted, but in 1921 it was discussed for the first time in Parliament when introducing discriminatory legislation. but this failed when both House of Commons and Lords rejected it, as they feared it would draw attention and encourage women to explore homosexuality. The Wolfenden Report was published in 1957. This meant homosexuality could no longer be legitimately regarded as a disease, and aimed to bring about change in the current law to protect the public. It took 10 years for the government to implement the report recommendations in the Sexual Offences Act of 1967. This legalised same-sex acts between two men over the age of 21 conducted in private. Scotland and Northern Ireland followed suit 10 years later. In 1966, the Beaumont Society was set up so that they could educate and inform the public about transgender people. They are now the biggest and longest-running organisation in the UK. After the Stonewall riots, the Gay Lesbian Front was founded in 1970. GLF fought for the rights of the LGBTQ+. In late 1973, GLF disbanded and the campaign Homosexual Equality was created. However, the age of consent equality didn't come until 2001. The Conservative government introduced the Local Government Act, which banned all promoting homosexuality or pretended family relationships. It also prohibited councils from funding educational materials and projects which they thought promoted homosexuality. This law meant that students no longer got educated about the LGBTQ+ community and therefore didn't get the support that they needed. This was legalised in 1988 and repealed in 2003. Finally, in 2004, same-sex couples were allowed to legally enter into binding partnerships, which is similar to marriage through the Civil Partnership Act. In 2013, same-sex couples were allowed to marry. The Gender Recognition Act of 2004 gave transgender people full legal recognition of their gender, allowing them to get a new birth certificate, although gender options are still limited to male or female. The laws have evolved at different rates across the globe, and in 72 countries, homosexuality is still illegal. There is still room for improvement to ensure all of the members of the community are safe and able to live their most authentic lives. It's hard to believe, but conversion therapy is still legal in the UK, and often shrouded in secrecy. The Miseducation of Cameron Post and Boy Erased are two good films about conversion camps, although both are set in the US. In July 2018, the UK government announced as part of their LGBT action plan that they will bring forward proposals to ban conversion therapy at the legislative level, but are yet to do so.